And I worked with leaders from over 50 countries globally. And what I've learned is that no matter where we're from, what we look like, our humanity, our experience may be different,
Right.
but our humanity is the same. We all have a underlying need, first of all, to belong, right? To be accepted, and not recognizing that the first person that we have to accept is ourselves. and that's actually gonna fuel us into stepping into our bold, audacious life.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our ongoing goal is to help our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. I'm thrilled to be here with you and sharing insights and stories that can make a difference. Now, thank you for taking the time to join us. It really is appreciated. Your presence means the world to me. Now, imagine you're a sailor, embarking on a journey across uncharted waters. The ocean, vast and unpredictable, represents self-doubt and fear. Yet, it's only by navigating these waters with courage and determination that you can reach new, audacious shores of leadership. Embrace your inner power as your compass, guiding you to lead your authenticity and drive both personal and professional growth. Kisha Wynter is a seasoned leadership consultant and executive coach with over 20 years of experience in leadership development and human resources. Having worked with leaders from over 50 countries in a Fortune 20 company herself, Kisha is passionate about fostering bold, audacious leadership and helping individuals step into their full potential. Kisha's extensive experience in leadership and her personal journey of embracing audacity make her insights invaluable for anyone looking to overcome self-doubt and step into bold leadership. So now that we're ready to go, let's turn over to our conversation with Kisha. Enjoy. Hey, Kisha, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you making the time to do this.
No, thank you. I'm excited to be here and to talk to your audience, Audley.
Yeah, I know. This is great. Thank you. We spend much time on this podcast, and talking about how you live this best audacious life and what's involved with that. And I see it very much as a journey. We're on our own pathway to get there. And you don't know this, but the topic of leadership happens to be one of my favorite topics. I love talking about it so much, and that lines in very much with this analogy of this pathway, because leaders are on their own journey of growth and development and the pathway that they take. So you're a leadership consultant, and so I want let our audiences know a little bit about you. So perhaps what we can do as a starting point is maybe just fill our audience in on who you are, the work you do, and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Very good question. I am a leadership consultant and executive coach with over 20 years of experience in leadership training, development, and human resources. Most of my experience was working for a global multinational organization, a Fortune 20 company, actually, one of the top companies. And I worked with leaders from over 50 countries globally. And what I've learned is that no matter where we're from, what we look like, our humanity, our experience may be different,
right,
but our humanity is the same. We all have a underlying need, first of all, to belong, right? To be accepted, and not recognizing that the first person that we have to accept is ourselves. and that's actually gonna fuel us into stepping into our bold, audacious life. I call it bold, audacious, courageous. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Sure.
But also it is about making an impact, leaving a legacy in our own families, in our communities, on our job, and in the world. And that's why I resonate so much with that audacious living ideology. And it really attracted me to your podcast, because what I know is this: If we're not living audaciously in our own lives, it's really hard to lead somebody else down that path. And so what started this journey for me personally is building up that courage and boldness and that audacity to step into the life that I wanted, right? And one of the things I say I look up,
which isn't always an easy thing,
no,
stepping into that life.
it's not, especially when you look at top of organizations and the leaders. Luckily, it's beginning to change now. We're not there yet, but like back 20 years ago, when I looked at the top of my organizations, people didn't look like, sound like, act like me. They also didn't, right? I'm naturally an introvert. You may not see it on this podcast, but they also didn't have my personality, right? So a lot of times we talk about diversity, which is a part of my background. We focus on demographics, the things that you can see, but then and that's important.
Yes.
And then there's the personality aspect as well, right? We think of the loud, audacious, as we would say, person, and not recognizing that even if you're more introverted, you still can have an outsized impact. And so looking at the top of the organizations, I didn't see somebody that looked like me, so I didn't feel like I could step into leadership. I didn't feel like I could that audacious life, right? So a lot of that was my story.
And it's interesting because when we talk about the introverts, right? When we talk about diversity, rather, it's a divergent of thoughts. That's what's important in this. But the order to ensure that we're getting the input, there's onus on the leaders to create that space that allow people to feel safe to share their divergent thoughts. So if you're in a boardroom with a dozen people and they all feel one way, and I think differently from them, is a space conducive to allow me to say, here's why I got a different viewpoint. Like, and if that space doesn't do that, then I think that there's some failings in leadership for not allowing that space to be natural and fluid.
There's a lot of failings, and they miss out a lot, right? A lot of organizations, we talk about creating a space for innovation and growth. And this is really important as we think about 2020. Things are changing by the minute, right? And if you're not quickly able to innovate, adapt, change, you're going to be left in the background immediately as an organization. I'm not even talking about an individual, as an organization. And sometimes I think, as I said, I do executive coaching, but executive coaching is not just of the executive and the leaders themselves, it's about the system as a whole. And so when we think about coaching, we're talking about coaching individuals, but I think it's really important to coach teams and to think about how coaching is in the context of the culture that you're in. Because a lot of times organizations say they want one outcome, but they get in their own way, just like we get in our own ways as individuals. You hire people because of their divergent thinking, but then you beat it out of them when they come inside the organization. Like, no, we want you to think and act like everybody else. I'm like, yeah, but you're looking for a new outcome. The definition, as you know, of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So that's how those two align.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the more it continues, the more it just can perpetuate itself over and over and over again. And you need that as the outside perspective. Someone step back and go, wait a second, like, why are we doing this same thing again? It didn't work the last time. But again, I'm going to restate the point that's made. I'm not doing that if I feel my job's on the line. I'm not able to speak up publicly.
You don't have the privilege to do that financially, right? So, which is why it's easier, to an extent, to have somebody come in like me. I'm like, hey, like, you paid me to give you a different idea, and I don't work for you technically. I'm just an external consultant. So here's my analysis. Here's my recommendation. Then it's up to you on whether or not you're going to take action. But the ideal situation is that you create a culture where there is psychological safety.
Yes.
That people feel as if they can share a different idea, and then they're not going to receive backlash for it, right? I was texting online with a friend of mine, and I said to her, what about all the changes that's happening in our country? We won't get down into that too much, but like, well, are you concerned about the backlash that's going to happen to women going forward? And she says, well, you know, that's what we do. We eat backlash for breakfast. Okay, yes. We eat backlash. I'm like, yes, agreed. We do, but we shouldn't have to.
Right, right.
We shouldn't have to in a corporate setting, right? That divergent opinion should be welcome so that everybody rises. So but it starts at the individual level, frankly. Like I can't lead, I can't executive coach anyone if I haven't decided to step outside of my comfort zone and to live boldly and audaciously and courageously.
Why is it important to be bold, audacious, and courageous in leadership?
A lot of things that we just said, but first of all, going back, I'm going to take it to on a personal level.
Okay.
Right. Because I don't think, as I said, you can actually do this effectively if you haven't walked the walk yourself. Like you can't lead somebody to a place you haven't been.
Got you.
Right. And so perfect example, if I started to allude on this in the beginning, I looked at in the top of organizations, and you know, as a young 20-something-year-old, I didn't see leaders that looked like me, sounded like me, had my personality. And I felt as if I had to mold myself into a specific prototype of what leaders look like, right?
Right, right.
And when you work with a global, diverse world, right? Companies are in multiple countries. And even if they're not in multiple countries, they have people from all over the world working within their country, even if it's in one country. Right?
Exactly.
And, you know, so for me, nobody told me like, Kisha, you have to change to be but the people that were consistently being promoted, they acted very similarly. And so I reached a pivotal point in my career when I went in, although, you know, people may look at me now and say, oh, which we'll talk about, you have a book coming out, you spent 20 years in leadership, you coach executives, you own your own company. Like you must have always born with this level of self-assurance and confidence. And that wasn't the case because as I said, I reached a pivotal point. I think it was back in 2006 or something like that, when I was asked as a young HR leader by a C-suite executive, I need you to come to my office and give me an assessment of my team. And I thought to myself, I was just like, well, what am I gonna, this guy is, you know, 20 years my senior. What am I gonna tell him that he doesn't already know? He's probably gonna think I add no value. He's probably gonna think I'm not smart enough or insightful enough, you know, but I pushed through. I went to the meeting and I started to share with him my perspective. And as I was speaking, you know, my heart's racing, my hands are sweating. It surprised me because not only was he keenly listening, but he was like furiously taking notes. And I thought to myself, well, what is he writing down? Like, the thing I'm saying.
What am I saying that matters so much?
Yeah, right. Like, isn't it obvious what I'm saying? And that's what we do, first of all. We underestimate the things, our experience and the things that come naturally to us. So we underestimate and undermine it while at the same time simultaneously elevating somebody's brilliance, not realizing that what we know is an absolute game changer for somebody else.
Yes.
And so it's in that moment I first of all realized that I did have something to offer. I did have a perspective that a senior executive could learn from. And that's why, you know, I talk a lot about self-doubt, imposter syndrome, fear, right? That's a lot of things that stop us from stepping into our audacious living. That's frankly what it is. And so I realized in that moment that the true imposter was self-doubt and fear, not us.
That's correct.
And once we learn that we have something to bring to the table, I know what I learned in that day, that my opinion mattered, it brought value. I also learned that I could be in a position, I didn't only belong at the table, but I was capable of leading it. And then over time, in that moment, they talk about playing with the big boys. I was like, not only could I play with the big boys, but they could learn a thing or two from me. He was furious writing down stuff. And so this is why I spend my time now focusing on teaching all corporate professionals, but especially women, how to really stand in your unique brilliance, how to turn that inner critic into your inner coach, and how to own your power and unleash it. So, and that's what brings me into the audacious aspect of things.
I love it. No, and it all makes so much sense. And it's fitting too, particularly sort of where our times now, the messages, right? I know early you talked about impact and as part of a leader's role. I would politely interject the word positive, right? Positive impact is a very key aspect.
Audaciously interject.
Yes, there we go, right? Like I'm gonna step forward. Like,
Yeah.
well, it's when you're a show you can, right? So there we go.
Yeah.
There we go. I've got the
Right.
power, right? So,
Right,
but,
you do.
but the reality is though that being able to have that positive impact, because a leader will always have an impact, and it can be positive, but it also can be negative, and that's a
Yes.
real, right? That's a real, a real dynamic.
Yeah.
I believe, and I'm hazard to guess that you're with me, is that it really should be positive. It needs to be positive. It's funny. Leadership is one of those topics where if you ask different people, what is leadership, or to define leadership, or what it means to them, you're gonna get, like, if you ask 10 different people, you probably get 10 different responses, right? Because it's one of those unique topics that's very experiential based. Like, my framework, my understanding of leadership is what I've seen. So if you've had great leaders that have supported you and listened to you, listening becomes an important aspect to you, and that's what you lead with. Versus maybe it was another dynamic. And so that's why one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of leadership. I just want to touch on the positivity thing, because I think that's sometimes a forgotten aspect. I think we assume it, but it is important.
It's funny, like, talking about leadership, as I said, you have to lead yourself first.
Yes.
But I was reading an article on HBR just this morning, so it's super fresh, that I really loved how this article broke things down and very aligned with other things I talked about. It said great leaders are four things: confident, which is what I just talked about.
Yep.
Owning your power, owning your brilliance. But then the second is connected, which means you're connected with other people, right? It's not just about you, first of all. You want to ensure that you're making people that come to work for you, something I always say, that they leave the experience of working with you better than they entered. So you get a positive impact on their life. They learn, they grow, they transform positively, right? As you just said, because of the impact. But then you're committed. And I say committed is to that mission, the purpose, the legacy that you want to leave, that is probably part of the organization missions and purpose. But what is your own mission and purpose? Yeah. Because how will you go work for an organization that you think is aligned to what you believe if you don't even have you're not clear about what that is for yourself? Yep. And then the last piece is very much aligned to the topic of this podcast. He said courageous, but I think it's that audacity, because you could do all the first three very well, but if you're not willing to push against especially as a leader, to push against the pole, to push against the grain, for the purpose, not of being disruptive or just, just for the sake of it, but for the sake of positive transformation internally within the company, then what are we doing? Are we really leaders? Leaders are the ones that are supposed to be taking the first step and setting the tone. Yeah. And my philosophy is that we're all are leaders in different ways, but our sphere of influence may be smaller.
Sure,
versus.
Yeah. And you talked a couple of times now about the ability to lead ourselves. I think that's a key aspect, in this as well. I just want to go back very quickly to the point around sort of self-doubt or the fears, or maybe even the imposter syndrome that comes up from time to time. And I've had to learn the significance in listening to the things that people say about me, right? So it for some, I know there's a school of thought, well, hey, who cares when you're doing something? Who cares what people say? Do your thing. Don't listen to other people. But I always say, you need to listen to people. Certainly, their criticisms are important for your own growth or development. But when someone says things like, hey, you'd be really good at this, right? It's important to listen to that because they've got that outside perspective of ourselves that we don't necessarily have or we can't necessarily see. And I can remember a gentleman once, telling me, "Hey, I can really see." And I've told this story many times before. So those listening to this podcast are like, again, but I'm gonna tell you the story again.
Tell
Uh,
me.
well, yeah, you're the first time hearing it. So a friend of mine, Rick, he passed away a few years ago, but he was in a battle. He was battling with a prostate cancer, and at the time I was volunteering. So I'm based here in Canada, Toronto, Canada, and I was started to volunteer for a professional basketball league, right? And basketball is my thing, and I was excited about it. So I was helping him just do random stuff. I used to do some media stuff, some communication stuff, and I was doing it in the capacity to volunteer just because I wanted to be involved. They were having an event, and I said, Rick, why don't you come on out? I want you to check it out. This is, 'cause I knew he would enjoy it, and obviously he was dealing with some illness at the time, so I thought it would be a good divergence from what he was dealing with. And he had a great time, and I remember on the car ride home, he said to me, he said, Audley, I could see you running this thing one day. And the first thing I said to him, right? What do we say? Nah, what are you talking about? Come on, man, just stop. Like, what, Rick's? Just stop, man. Thank you, but nah. And he didn't let it go. And I would say for the next maybe 2 or 3 months, he probably called me once a week specifically just to talk about what he saw for me. As the story goes, he passes away. It was early 2015. He passes away, and in 2017, the same league that I had been working with as a volunteer, I got a call from the chairman of the board offering me the appointment to be the commissioner of the league. Randomly, out of the blue, didn't see it coming, didn't expect it, caught me off guard, and I reflected on what Rick had said 2 years ago. And I remember in that moment, I was like, oh, wow, like this is, first of all, I was blown away for sure. This is incredible. And I remember for a very brief instance feeling a bit of sadness because like, wow, like he saw this for me and now he's not here to actually see it. And I remember literally saying that out loud. And then I paused and I said, no, 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 no. He didn't need to be here to see it because he already saw it years before, right? And so it's that outside perspective that people bring to us, and we need quite frankly, I think we need to embrace it, as opposed to sabotage, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're sabotaging our own greatness when someone says, "Hey, this is I see this in you," right? And we shun it when we really should be embracing it. And so that was sort of what came to mind as we were talking about that whole fear and imposter syndrome and the self-doubt for sure. We all, even I experienced it. There you go.
Yeah. And frankly, well, first of all, I love that story
Thank you.
because I think a lot of times people see more in us than we see in ourselves because they're not clouded with the history, right? That we've been through and what the stories that we tell ourselves. They don't see all that. They see the potential. They see the greatness. And sometimes it's for us to step up, step into it, and step higher into our calling. My own philosophy on the flip side of self-doubt and fear is, I say this all the time, it's not about not feeling fear. I think back in the day, I can't remember the name of the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, or something like that. But anyway, some extent. But it's really true because courage, specific courage, is not the absence of fear. You actually need fear to be present in order to be courageous, because it wouldn't be because courageousness is about overcoming and moving forward despite fear, not allowing fear to paralyze you.
That's right.
And that's the difference. And I also think it's an opportunity to celebrate yourself when you feel this fear, because it's telling me that learning and growing is happening. We don't feel fear in doing things that we've always done because it's so normalized, right? I use this analogy all the time. right? In life, most people can resonate with this.
Mhm.
The first time you learn to drive, right? You are, I don't know about you, but I was like, where's the clutch? Where's the gear? Where's the brakes? Where's the this? It's fearful and overwhelming. And you're thinking about every step that you take, right? Every corner you turn. And then 20 years later, like you drive to work, you don't even remember like how you got from here to there. It's just second nature now. It's just automatic. Do you feel fear and doubt? Like, no, most people don't, because you've done it so many times that it now becomes the norm. And so, yeah, the first time you do it, it's new. And so that's what I said. Guess what? The first time you present to a board of directors, yes, you should feel, you're going to feel uncomfortable because you're stepping outside of your comfort zone. But guess what? If you're doing it 3-4 times, unless there's something going on with the company, but 3-4 times a year for 20 years, it's second nature by year 20, right? Because now you've normalized it. But we don't get from the fear to the normal feeling because we don't take enough repetitions. We don't do enough. And so it's the courage that's going to get us to keep doing it so that it becomes second nature.
That's right. That's right. And then when it's second nature, it's a wrap at that point. Like
a wrap. Then you go on to the next thing. It's like, what's the next challenge?
The next challenge. Yeah. No, and I think that's a great mindset, right? Like it doesn't, it's like so I have this bold framework I talk about. And BOLD, the B stands for better than yesterday. So yes, the mountain I climbed today is fantastic, but the peak of that mountain is the bottom of another one. Like there's always something that you could be doing, right? And not to say that we can't celebrate our successes, absolutely celebrate our successes and enjoy it for that moment, but also recognize it's for that moment.
For that moment.
As opposed to, like it doesn't help me as a grown man that I talk about my Little League championship that we won when I was in grade 5. That doesn't serve me.
Have you done nothing since then?
Right. Well, this is exactly it. Like, that's great, but now what? Right. So it's always looking for what's that next thing. And so very, very quickly, the bold framework, B is better than yesterday. The O stands for outlast adversity. We're going to feel challenges. We're going to run into difficulties. We've got to outlast that to get to the other side of our greatness. L stands for live your truth, which is very much tied into authenticity and that's very, very important for leaders. And then lastly, the D is for disrupt the norm. And if you're going to be an audacious individual leader, whomever, then you have to recognize that you're going to have to be your own trailblazer. Like the Wright brothers, like Harriet Tubman, like a whole host of individuals that decided they weren't going to do what everyone else was doing. And so that's the framework to live a more audacious life in a nutshell.
Oh, I really, really love that. I have in my book, Your Power Unleashed, which we'll talk about. I have a bold. It's just about taking action. So I call it breaking out of limits daringly. It's literally, but I was like, we have the bold, but I like your bold. It's amazing.
Your bold is good too.
Very amazing.
Good. Good. Well, I'm glad we shared bolds. There we go.
Yes, we did. Shared a lot. I mean, both of us attracted to the audacity, right? And the audaciousness.
So you mentioned your book, how savvy women use courage to get promoted, get paid, and find fulfillment. That is a mouthful, but I will tell you the part that really stands out to me is that finding fulfillment piece, man. That's that piece for me. Just like it just resonates big time because the fulfillment is tied. There's so many things tied into our fulfillment, personal happiness, satisfaction, and then what we can do for others because of the way that we're feeling fulfilled. And so that's a big one for me. Anyhow, tell us about the book and the difference it makes in people's lives.
So it's actually going to be released September 17th. So it's not out yet. So the title is, you named the subtitle, which gives all the context in the world. The title is Your Power Unleashed, which is my branding, my website, everything. And I talk about power. When we think about power, a lot of times we think about power over other people.
Yep.
But there's an article that was just released, I think this weekend, again, by Harvard Business Review. And it talks about specifically women, but I believe any conscious leader begins to think about power in a different way, right? And I know this resonates with you because you talk a lot about that internal work. Power over other people is the old way, or the old school way, that of power. There is power internally, right? It's your own owning your power. It is believing accessing your own inner audacity in order to live that audacious life.
Mhm.
So believing yourself, stepping out. We just talked about imposter syndrome, self-doubt, fear, doing the inner work so that you can break through it. Because as I said, you can't take somebody else where you haven't gone yet. And then the second aspect of power is once you've done that with yourself, now as a leader, you're using your power for good with others, not over others.
Yes.
Together we rise. You're using your power to advocate for others, to lift others up, right? And one of the most, for me, I'm much better at this now. I used to have a harder time advocating for myself than for others. And so as a leader, I practice my audacity and my audaciousness really by finding my voice to speak for others. And the more I did it, I was just like, well, if I can speak for others, I can speak for myself. But it was aligned to my values because one of my values is contribution and service,
Mhm.
right? And I always wanted to pay it forward. And that's why I go back to, leadership has to be based in something else rather than just making yourself look good. What is impact? What's the legacy? What's the outcome that you want to have other people have as a result of working with you? And so this is the context when I say your power unleashed. It's two phases. It's owning it first, but then how do you unleash it? But you're unleashing it with good intention to help and uplift.
Yes.
Right. So that's the context. But there's two aspects to this work.
Mhm.
It's the internal work.
Yep.
And even though it says how women use courage, right? It's for everyone if you think about the concepts, right? Because we all need to be more courageous. We all need to be more audacious. And so it's working through those internal limiting beliefs, which we talked a lot about already, so I won't get into. But once you do that, the second half of it is around self-leadership before you get into other leadership. So how do you, especially if you come from a certain background, I didn't grow up in a household where my parents had a corporate background. I didn't know what it took to succeed. The only thing I knew is that put your head down, work hard, and you'll get the reward that you deserve. Well, no, that's a lie. Because some of the hardest working people never get recognized and rewarded for the impact that they bring. One of the reasons is because the right people don't know that you're making an impact. So what is your value proposition, right? How are you able to communicate your brand?
Yes.
How are you able to actually network? That's the right word. Network with leaders and decision makers so that they're going to be willing to sponsor you. Because if you are doing great work and the right people know, then you'll get the sponsorship and it will be much easier to ascend. Like, not to get into politics, but how easy is it for a president to say, okay, I'm going to pick my VP versus somebody fighting for VP? Well, I know you're good, so I'm going to pick you. You're the one I want versus you trying to fight all your way up, right? And so sometimes it's just like figuring out a way to make it not that complicated for yourself. And it is this idea in Black American culture here, Tyler Perry used to always say, I guess there was a movie actually called I Can Do Bad All by Myself, right? Well, maybe, but you go further together, right?
That's right.
Rather than trying to do it yourself. And so that's some of the strategies I teach in the second half of the book. It's how do you navigate organizational politics, build your personal brand, salary negotiate, all the things that you need to do in order to succeed professionally. And then as you succeed, how do you coach and mentor others and pay it forward and lift them up?
Yeah. So there's no doubt in my mind, Kisha, that you had your own challenges and struggles on your leadership journey. But I love the way you're able to articulate, again, the key aspects of your book, like it was a piece of cake for you. Like it was like, it just, it's a beautiful, no, it really is a beautiful gift because, I know it wasn't easy for you. There's no, I don't even have to ask you that. I know you had your challenges and you had, like you said, there was not a lot of people that look like you. But so take what you've gone through, take your experiences, produce something, i.e. a book that can help others and give them happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction, and joy, and not that your challenges are to the forefront. Like for example, you can you can tell you can like you can someone can tell you an inspirational story of the challenges and how hard it was and the misery that they went through. If that's where the story stops, that was a very miserable story, right?
Right.
But if
Right.
you're able to, talk about what you experienced, but then what you did to get through it, and then how you did it, and the challenges you had to overcome, and the lessons that you learned, and what you're now doing, like that's a totally different, same experience, totally different
Totally
story.
different. You can
So
now stand on your story.
yes,
As one of my coaches would say, Lisa Nichols, stand on your story, not in your story.
that's
When you're
right.
in your story, it's dragging you down.
That's right.
You haven't overcome it. But when you stand on it, you're able to still look at where you've been,
Sure.
but you're on top of the story now. You're not in it. Right.
Yeah.
And I'll share this because you said how I use it to write a book. It's actually a result. The book is a result of my story and then a bunch of other people that I coached through it because, and how did this happen? When I was in, said Fortune 20 company,
Mhm.
one of the things I was in the decision-making table, now behind closed doors, I would hear this conversation over and over again that this woman, this person of color, this whatever is so good at what they do. So let's
Mm.
be very clear on that. Their expertise is strong, their performance is outstanding, but the thing is missing that they don't have leadership presence
Yes.
or executive presence. And what does that mean? Ultimately, we talked about the four things just before about confidence. Confidence is number one. They weren't confident in their own brilliance. They didn't own it, so they wouldn't be able to communicate powerfully and with conviction, right? And the consistent feedback to me was just like, okay, Kisha, go tell them to be more confident. I'm like, that's not helpful. What are the steps and the strategies that we need to help them get there? And so nobody else could solve it. But having been the person who had to figure it out for herself, I took a step back and said, what are the steps and the tactics and the tools that I use to build myself to be able to get where I am now? And I'm just going to package that into a little program. And I'm just going to train the women and teach the women in the organization. It was such a hit that the guys wanted in on it too. They're like, oh, what about this? And so I was just like, yeah, this is for everyone. And
I love
I
it.
solved a problem. This is another aspect of leadership if you want to advance. I saw a problem that was within an organization. And based on my own personal experience, I knew how I solved it for myself. So I could benefit the organization by solving it for the organization. So I solved it for them. Many
Yep.
women went through it. And it was such a success. Then I decided, I was just like, well, if I'm doing this in a corporation and it's successful, I can start my own business doing this. And that's where I am now. But the
Beautiful.
big part
Beautiful.
is really ensuring as a leader that whatever you're doing, you're working on paying it back, but also you're aligning it to a problem within the company and you're solving a problem for the company.
Love it. I love it. Beautiful. Beautiful. You should be very proud of your efforts, Kisha. It's
Thank
fantastic
you.
stuff. For our listeners that wanted to connect with you or learn more about your work, where can we send them?
You could go to, first of all, my website, Your Power Unleashed. So UNLEASHED.org or .com. It doesn't matter. Or on LinkedIn, Kisha Wynter, WYNTER is my last name. I hang out on LinkedIn, send me a DM. I always answer DMs on LinkedIn, unless you send me something crazy, then I might block you. But yes, you can find me on LinkedIn and on my website. Those are
For
two
sure.
places I
For
hang out.
sure. Well, certainly congratulations. This is the first book, right? This is your first book?
This is my first book.
Well, congratulations,
Thank
a
you.
new and aspiring author. I think again the idea of taking your lessons and your experiences and being able to package them as a gift for someone else is such a beautiful thing. So, congrats on that. Congrats on sort of finding your pathway, your journey, and thank you for being here on the Audacious Living Podcast. That was cool.
Oh my God, it was amazing being here. Thank you so much, Audley. I look forward to talking to you again.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Back, we're here on the podcast, and much thanks and appreciation goes out to Kisha. And during our conversation, she emphasized the importance of self-acceptance as a foundation for audacious leadership. She shared how recognizing and embracing our unique qualities allows us to lead with authenticity. Her journey of overcoming the barriers of being an introvert in a leadership landscape that often values extroversion is a testament to the power of living boldly. Kisha believes that when we accept ourselves and create spaces that welcome diverse perspectives, we not only grow as individuals, but also drive innovation and success in organizations. To connect directly with Kisha or learn more about her work, please check out the contact details in the show notes. Without question, she's eager to engage with listeners and help you on your journey to audacious leadership. She's actually offering free initial consultation for executive coaching sessions, and she's additionally providing a special discount on her leadership development book for our podcast listeners. Again, thank you for being here. We've sadly reached another episode, the end of another episode of the Audacious Living Podcast. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please consider following, subscribing, and sharing if you haven't already done so, because it will certainly benefit others. Your support helps us grow and continue to bring valuable content your way. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.